Welcome to the Spare Parts Podcast with FTC Team 535 Tobor. This is Episode 7, an interview with Destiny.
Hello and welcome to the Spare Parts Podcast with FTC Team 535 Tobor. Let's first start by introducing ourselves. So I'm Ben.
I'm Kyler.
I'm Tony.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Rand.
And so today we wanted to talk about something that's not necessarily specifically related to the game, but is very important for teams. And we know a lot of teams will probably have competitions in early November. And so we wanted to take this podcast to talk about judges' interviews, which will be very important coming up soon. Now, I will say that the game manual is very short on information about the judging interview. They basically just say that you will have a judging interview and that you will go before 2 or 3 judges. That's about it. And compared to the amount that's in there about the notebook, that's almost nothing.
Almost nothing.
And so I guess I'd like to bring up one important point about what they do mention in there, is that it's highly recommended that everybody on the team participate. And so we extremely highly recommend that make sure that everybody on your team is at the judge's interview and that they talk and present something meaningful.
It just shows good team unity.
It does. It demonstrates team unity. It demonstrates that everybody was involved, and it also helps to show the team dynamics, which is something that's harder for the judges to pick up from the engineering notebook. The other thing to keep in mind is that at most competitions, you will have 10 minutes to be in front of the judges, but the judges are going to be hearing 5 or 6 presentations just like yours. So you need to have something to make you stand out compared to all the other teams that are also going to be giving 10-minute presentations about how good their design is and how good their programming was.
And by the way, when we say stand out, we mean that in the best possible way.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get it, yeah, so you could stand out in terms of being horrible. But,
I don't know.
yeah.
All publicity is good publicity.
That's what politics have taught us.
Okay.
Oh, God.
So Rand had something very important to say that's really helpful.
So this is something that, from my experience at least, I've seen in judging interviews, and that's that it's a very important thing. It's basically where it's the jump off for getting awards at any competition. But when going into it, you need to try and not stress over it too much. So you need to prepare stuff and have a presentation ready. But if you overthink it or get stressed out trying to perfectly memorize stuff, sometimes that can trip you up. If the judges ask a question in the middle, which some judges do, some judges ask questions the whole time, you need to be able to adapt to that and go off script if you need to. So it's good to have things prepared. You're going to need to do that. But when you're going in, just try and calm down a little bit. Be ready to take whatever comes, and not worrying about it like that will allow you to be more human, not too robotic, and that will help with what Ben was talking about of not blending in, to stick out a little bit. If you're very human, it'll be easier for them to remember you.
Yeah. And then also you want to emphasize things that they can't really get from the notebook, right? So how your team works together is something that's harder to convey on paper than it is when you're talking, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've built this, we'll call it a product, your team, your robot, your engineering notebook, and basically what those 10 minutes in front of the judges are to sell it in a way that they would not be able to come, maybe, to their own conclusion of. You're telling them all the little details you might have missed. You're telling them the specifics, the highlights, I should say, of what makes your team special, different, better.
Yeah. And I will say one thing. So we've been talking about how it relates to the notebook. Make sure that in your presentation, don't bring up stuff that's not in your notebook in the presentation as a way of bringing it up. That's usually not a good policy. That shows kind of lack of organization. So make sure that if you bring up something in the presentation, that it is included in your notebook, and then you can also reference, this is in our notebook, and you can find more details about it on this page.
Judges do like to look up what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've seen several times in our presentations, we'll mention a page number, what we're talking about, and they'll flip to it to keep track of where we are.
Yeah.
Some other things that judges really, really like are visual aids, I must say.
Pretty things.
Bringing in CAD drawings of your robot is a nice thing to have, on a larger scale for them to see. Also, bringing in your robot itself is something that I think might be critical to show them how your robot functions in an actual tangible model in front of them.
Yeah. Of course, they love graphs, charts, prototypes, things that again make you remembered, because large visual objects are memorable.
And definitely do bring your robot. We found in the past that we brought a printout of our 3D model with us that was really helpful. But definitely do bring the robot itself in case they want to ask questions about it. One thing I wanted to quickly bring up was that how judging works, at least in Indiana for us. I don't know that it's the same everywhere, but it should be similar. Judges will see your interview. That's usually the first contact that they have with you. Then based on that, if your interview is decent, they will look through your notebook anyway. But I think that if your interview isn't that good, they're going to be far less inclined to look through your notebook carefully.
Well, it doesn't hurt any to compel them.
Yeah, definitely. And then after that, based on your notebook and your presentation, they might come around to the pit area and ask additional questions, possibly for specific awards, possibly just in general, about your team, about your design, about your programming, anything they want.
Usually a good sign.
Yeah.
And one thing, you want to have everyone on your team be able to answer some questions, but if it's about a section you don't know, like I'm not a programmer, if a judge came up to me and was asking about parts of the program, I might say, go talk to Tony, go talk to Ben, and that's fine. And you want to be able to tell them some parts, you don't want to be ignorant, but if you want to bring in someone who's more of an expert, do that. Those judges are there because you've been slowly sifted and they found you to be one of the better ones. So give them the best you can.
And not knowing an answer to something like that, say you're a designer and you don't know the answer to a very specific programming question, that's okay. And that really does show kind of good organization that people are being specialists in certain things. Now, sure, you want to have a rough idea of what's going on and you want to know who to talk to about the specifics, but you don't need to know every single tiny detail as long as somebody does.
But you don't want to just leave time for questions when they come and find you, though.
Yeah. So we'll move on to things to include in the presentation. And so I guess who wants to kind of start us off with that?
I guess I can take care of that. So things you kind of want to include is definitely, I guess we should start off at the beginning of the day of every meeting. You definitely want to include the Scrum that we've been doing this year. I guess, I don't know if we've explained that in previous podcasts because it's kind of new this year, but.
Yeah, so I mean, it might be a good idea to explain how your team meets, how you work together, and how you kind of organize.
Your daily processes.
Yeah. I mean, we use the Scrum process. We might do a podcast on that in the future on how to implement that, but this bit of the presentation could apply to any method your team uses to stay organized.
Okay. So another thing I think you should always have is you kind of, at least how I would do this is you want to explain to the judges the best way to organize this is like starting at the beginning of the season. You kind of start off with the summer, what you did over the summer and stuff, and then you kind of want to go into the kind of the start of the year where you met with everybody at like either the kickoff or just either your first meeting or something like that. And you kind of want to explain to the judges what you kind of did to get started and how you kind of brainstormed everything and everything like that. And you want to include all the design stuff, make sure you have those drawings like we said earlier, and kind of just make sure everybody has something to say about everything. And just include things with the design, as I said, and then later things to build and stuff, and then programming would generally be last or intermediate.
Yeah, so I mean, you can go chronologically, like you were saying, but I would say it's almost a better idea to bring them up topic by topic. So we usually structure our presentations by kind of design and building to some extent, programming, and then community service.
And of course, it's just whatever works for you.
Yeah.
If your team can figure out a different way, that's fine, go with that. But chronologically or by topic is it's an easy way to get started on a presentation.
Yeah,
if
It's
you don't know
comfortable.
where to
You've
start.
experienced it in that order. You can recall it in that order. But whatever works for you, again, as you said, you may develop a whole new idea.
You know, we've been talking a lot about the saying the more intangible stuff, like team, how you work together. You know, stating stuff about team dynamics, showing up as a group. But you do need to talk about the robot. That's what you're there for. And one thing that we found, like Tony, when you give your CS presentations, you usually condense it down to one or two major topics, right?
Yes, I do.
Well, I mean, it's just pick the major items. You have an engineering notebook, so just pick some of the major things and go over those. So that
So some of the key items I have while I'm presenting about the programming side of things on our team, I take big topics from that I've included in the notebook. I explain.
So I guess you definitely want to go into a lot of specifics. You don't just want to be overly general. And so I guess the way we have typically structured our presentations is we go into some specific details about the design. So these parts are specifically innovative. This is good design work. This is an example of why our design process works well and the benefits of our process.
And if you're listening to Ben there, you might notice that those words are very relatable to certain awards that you could be winning. And that's kind of what you're there for. You're there to show why you're good at certain things. So
Point out aspects
if you want to just focus on certain awards, and so like for instance, if your team had an amazing design, but for whatever
Check it.
reason it just didn't come to fruition, or if you couldn't do as much community service, focus on your design. Maybe if you had a really good program, focus on your program. Focus on your strengths. I mean, you've only got 10 minutes, and you're going to want to leave at least some of that time for questions, because
They are curious.
they are.
Yeah.
And sometimes they might think of something that you couldn't have told them just off, like in your prepared presentation, and leaving time for them to ask those questions so that they can get the information they want will make it much easier for them to consider you for.
I know,
Yes.
because especially we've had a personal experience with this where we had a robot that when we built it did not work, but the concept behind it was a really cool one that if it had run would have been amazing.
Now, it did move, it just wasn't exactly polished.
Trying to see your little face there, and that's good. But the judges saw it for what we presented it as, an idea that could be an amazing one. And I believe in the Ohio State competition, we were recognized for that. We did get the design award for a robot that did not perform exactly how we wanted it to. But because we explained it to them, they asked questions, and we showed them enough about our true strength in our design, they were able to recognize that even past all the mechanical fallacies.
Yeah. So bring up everything, but do focus on your strengths. And so, I mean, if you should probably take a look at the list of awards. So, of course, everybody wants to win the Inspire Award. So you want to present everything, but you may also be very good in a specific area. So the Think Award is angled mostly towards the engineering notebook. The Connect Award is angled toward community connection, right? The Innovate Award and the Design Award, which are design components. The Motivate Award and the Control Award, which is a programming award. So if you think you have a really good program, spend more time on the program and less time on some of the other things. If you have really good community outreach, then spend more time on that and less time on the programming. And so that might be foregoing some awards or foregoing some of the strengths of your team, but it's a good way for even just you to think about it, to condense down your achievements into this is what we are really, really good at. Do we have any other advice about what to include? Essentially, we want to have specific details about everything you did, right?
And since every member is speaking, I feel like every member should be prepared in every field, at least to an extent. I remember one year, on a previous team I was on, our mascot was a nice robot dressed up in a suit, so I decided to dress up in a suit myself, and I went into the judging room, and I guess the judge thought I was just there to be some sort of a mascot, so he personally asked me a question about our community service, and I was able to successfully answer it, I say.
But they can pick you out and ask you strange questions.
Yeah, like I was a programmer. I mean, I dipped a little bit in community service, but my main strength was in coding itself. So when he asked me this question, it threw me off a bit, but I was still prepared well enough to answer it.
Yeah,
course,
so that
yeah.
brings us neatly into our next topic, which is the judges will ask questions, and you should definitely leave some time during your presentation for them to ask questions. And also be prepared that some judges might just jump in during your presentation and ask questions on the spot.
And it's kind of hard to predict what questions they can ask. You can think of some obvious ones, like maybe if you didn't talk about team dynamics, like how do you guys work together and stuff like that. But really, the best way to prepare for questions is just making sure that everyone knows generally how all of the sections went, so that a programmer can answer community service questions if they asked, or a designer can answer maybe some problems that came up in the build. Just make sure everyone's included in everything in some
It's
capacity.
true, because everyone should be included. I mean, because of course, as members of a robotics team, you should be aware of most of the comings and goings of the robotics team. Maybe not down to the very fine specifics of what they're doing, but still, you should receive regular updates from your team. And that way, like you said, when a judge comes and asks a question to a person, they can give the best answer to their ability. And if the judge asks a more specific question, they should also know which specific people are best suited to answer that specific question.
And that's something that you'll cultivate as a team as you go through your season, learning as you go how everyone does in their different fields, who is best at certain things, and also just as you go through the year, just making sure you keep track of how everyone else is doing. So
It's
you don't
called
get
growth.
No, I guess that's something that we've seen people get in trouble for in our experience. But in general, it's also a good idea to kind of plan out ahead of time. If a judge asks a question about programming, then let's know who's going to answer that question. Right?
Yeah, we know who to
and also-
delegate those responsibilities.
It also shows a very good team dynamic, which is a key element in stuff.
Yeah, and also one thing we've heard from some judges is to don't tag on to answers. So say that somebody asks Tony, a programmer, or me, a programmer, about community service, and so if they specifically ask for us, then answer the question. That's the important. That's why it's important for everybody to know about everything that's going on.
And you might have been noticing, just as I did now, that in this podcast we've done that quite a few times, adding on to each other's ideas. And
I don't know
this
what you mean by that, but okay.
This is a little more informal, but I'm just bringing this up to show that this is a very big habit that most people have. I mean, you want your team to be able to express all the ideas, so it can be kind of hard to suppress that. But if someone's saying something that's not quite right, it's usually for the best to just let them say their part and trust that it'll go fine. That shows that every member of the team can be trusted enough to say their own part.
And that's something that was specifically brought up to us by the head judge in Indiana, Mr. Osborne, who said that it's never a good idea to tag on to answers because, one, it shows that somebody isn't fully aware of everything that's been going on. Two, it also shows that there might be disagreement among team members, right? And we can't trust this person enough to give a satisfactory answer, right?
So just things to look out
let's.
for.
I'm going to bring up a few questions that might be asked, and so the classic one that I can think of is, what is gracious professionalism? And so for each of these questions, let's go around and think about how we might go about answering those questions.
Well, I personally think it's about crushing the senior team. I mean,
We had that one year. This is one of the reasons why we're going around with everyone now with questions like that, especially because they can pick out anyone. You want to make sure everyone understands, because we had one year where they went up and said, so, what do you think about gracious professionalism, right after one of our other team members had talked about how we were going to crush the other teams at our school. So it's good that everyone knows.
Robotics is a competitive sport, people, but it's also a sport of people. And we believe in robotics that we should help everyone as well as compete against them.
How do we want to answer that question, I guess?
well, we could.
What would be the answer?
What we came to the conclusion that gracious professionalism, it's about it's about FIRST Robotics being a big team. Aside from just your teams that you're competing with, we're all trying to solve the same problem. We're all given the same game. And in the real world, scientists and engineers use each other's information, they research stuff and share it with other people. And like that, at first, you're supposed to be able to share your ideas, communicate with other people, see how they solved it, tell them how you solved it, and by doing that, you'll figure out better ways to do things maybe than you could have come up with. And overall, in the entire robotics program, we should be able to make better solutions. And that idea of sharing thoughts and ideas with other teams and making a better product overall is something that is going on in the real world and is how problems are solved, which is one of the major reasons, I think, that people talk about gracious professionalism so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, because unlike any other sport, robotics is unique in the fact that, we'll say, enemy alliance is broken down in front of you and they're about to compete. And no other team will you find, or no other game. In hockey, you don't go find the opposite team another hockey stick if they broke it. You don't find on the other baseball team they broke a bat. You give them a new bat. In robotics alone, have I seen, even if a guy who is not necessarily with you, if they are not doing well, teams are instantly there to jump in.
Yeah.
even if they are not, again, competing with them, even if it's not to their benefit to help them. We jump in there, try to fix it, try to get things done. You can ask anyone for help, and more than likely in robotics, they'll try to help you to the best of their ability.
Yeah, and that's something that's really special about FIRST. So that was a pretty big tangent, but let's get back to some questions. So I guess one that I've thought of as might be kind of challenging for some teams to answer. What do you do to promote diversity in STEM?
Okay, so promoting diversity.
It's a strange question, especially because on
But it has been asked.
It has been asked
before.
Especially this last year. I mean, the year before. I know at least my team was asked. I don't know if your team was asked, but when the girls decided in CHS to form their own robotics team, I know the first question that was asked to us was, how do you promote women engineers? Because we didn't have any girls on our team. And we assured them that we were promoting, of course, female engineers at our school. They just chose to have their own team. And so it's really important to show that it's not just one
And
group.
one thing to mention is that some teams in the area, maybe it's just happens to be white males that want to be in it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but just be aware that if there's not a lot of diversity in your group for whatever reason, you might be asked about that. And maybe you can explain that there isn't that much diversity where you came from, but you're still trying to promote it and, going up and talking to other teams with, from other, maybe if you ever get a chance to meet teams from other countries or all-girls team, and asking them about how maybe they should try and bring in more diversity. But it's just something to consider. It's kind of an odd question because some teams don't have much control over that.
Yeah, but
We're in rural Indiana. We don't. It's a
We
demographic
huge.
fact that we have a lot of white men on our team.
if you can't tell, we're all white men.
So it is an important question to ask, and it's actually something that we have to struggle with in the real world too. And so promoting diversity is a big part of being on a FIRST robotics team. And so if you aren't doing that, it might be a good idea to think about, should we be doing that and how? So I guess, does anybody else have any ideas of questions that judges might ask you? Any other ideas?
Well, one
that might be
question-
difficult to go about answering.
One question I remember is, what was a major problem you came across?
Yeah.
They want to know that, no one's perfect. We've messed up hundreds of times already, and we're barely into the build section. So
Success
there
does
are
not
going to
come
be
first
problems,
try.
and having some problems in the back of your mind to tell the judges is probably good because they want to know about your successes and failures.
Yeah, and everybody's going to have failures, especially in engineering. And people, the more important thing is, how did you overcome your failure? Making sure that you aren't just kind of sweeping them under a rug, ignoring them, right?
One of the major questions they ask is, how do you fix this, or how do you solve this problem together as a team?
All right, then. So I guess one more thing. What does your team do together to have fun and to kind of promote team building?
Because robotics is a fun sport. You came here to have fun and learn.
So to go about answering that question, I would say, well, think about what have you done as a group. So we've gone out to dinner before. We do the Build Blitz where we do some interesting
podcasts.
activities.
We're doing a podcast right now.
Yeah, we do podcasts.
I'm pretty sure at least one of us is
Wait, is
having
this
fun.
recorded?
Yeah, so that's usually a pretty easy question to answer, but it's something that a lot of people don't tend to think about.
Another question I feel judges ask, I can guarantee they ask every time. As soon as everybody walks in, they always say, how are we doing this morning? And
You need to say good.
No, the response must always be good. Never say, it's okay. Be like, we're having a great time. We love all you people.
Yeah, so be positive. I guess the bottom line, be positive, make sure that everybody is very involved, and have fun in the presentation. Make sure it goes well, and it's a really great opportunity for you. So,
One last key thing that I know the judges ask also every time. All right, again, so they're going to ask you how your day's been. Always say good to that. But another thing that they're going to ask is, they're going to ask if this is your team number and name. All right, it's very important that you say yes to this because it throws off their entire schedule if you say no.
I'm not sure that joke was worth the build-up. But in any case,
well, thanks for listening. Our music is Pangea by Professor Click.
This has been Tobor Time. Thank you.